Hello everybody and welcome to Speculate Earth. One of the great mysteries of the world remains the efficiency and innovation that went into building the Egyptian pyramids. Some claim scaffolding, while others claim aliens. The possibility that the answer is much simpler than expected is what I want to discuss today. The Great Pyramid of Giza took 2 decades to build and is made up of 2.3 million bricks of limestone, each weighing around a ton. It is proposed that thousands of slaves, architects, laborers, and tradesmen were among the workforce to build this wonder. Means of construction were comprised of scaffolding and machines so complex, many speculate if human ingenuity could have been enough to put it all together. This hieroglyph, present in the tomb of Dehidotep, is a depiction of many slaves moving a large statue by pulling it, while a person standing on the structure pours water in front of it, perhaps a new hint as to how these massive objects were moved into place. An experiment documented by physicist Ans Heckenberg by the Fundamental Research on Matter at the University of Amsterdam determined that by wetting the sand to a certain amount, the labor force could be cut in half as the water lubricated the sand, making it much easier to move. In these experiments, it was shown that the required pulling force decreased proportional to the stiffness of the sands. Capillary bridges, small water droplets that bind the grains together, arise when water is added to the sand. A new revolutionary discovery was made in 2012 when a study on paleomagnetism of the bricks used to construct the pyramids Khufu and Khafre determined that the bricks were not actually carved, but instead casted in giant molds from limestone concrete. It was speculated that the bricks that made up the Great Pyramids were carved out of the limestone quarries not far from the pyramids themselves. However, this new study shows otherwise. A quote from this study says, quote, "Our paleomagnetic investigation is based on the assumption that if the blocks were made in situ by the geopolymer concrete technique, then their magnetic moments would all have been parallel. However, if the pyramids were constructed from blocks transported from the nearby quarries, having been rotated randomly during transport and construction, then the directions of their magnetic moments would be oriented randomly." End quote. Magnetic moments are a property of magnetism that determines the direction of magnetic pull. In geology, the magnetic moment of a stone is determined from when the stone itself is cemented. This means that because all of the stones in the pyramids observed had a magnetic moment pointing in approximately the same direction, these stones would have had to have been made on location to avoid the distortion that tectonic forces would have put on the initial stones, as well as the random rotations that would have happened during transportation. Because the magnetic moments were all in a relative north-south geographical direction, it can be determined that these bricks were made on site by pouring limestone concrete into massive casts and allowing it to bake and dry in the sun before moving it into place using the wet sand technique. So now we know how the bricks were made. We also know how they were transported along a horizontal surface. However, perhaps the most baffling of questions still remains. How were the bricks moved from the ground all the way up to the top of a pyramid? There were no wheels. There were no beasts of burden. And yet, at a rate of 1 stone every 2.6 minutes every single day, the Great Pyramids were put together. The most common interpretation remains that large scaffolding structures were built, including ramps and pulley systems, to move these bricks the intense near 500 feet vertically to the top of the pyramid. However, many obstacles begin to arise when considering this method of construction. Firstly, the manpower required to drag the stones up the ramps would have to be in the hundreds per stone, depending on the steepness, perhaps even more. With the number of slaves and workers available, it seems plausible, however very unlikely considering the rate of the placement of the stones. Not to mention, the construction of scaffolding strong and large enough to withstand 1-ton stones being dragged up hundreds of feet by thousands of slaves would take far more manpower, time, and resources than previously thought, and would need constant repairs from the damage dragging a stone of that size would make. So, aliens? Well, not quite. for there is one final speculation that has yet to be fully investigated. I believe in aliens. Not ancient aliens, but aliens nonetheless. Anytime I bring up the possibility of extraterrestrial life, the plausibility of ancient aliens, or, quote, the ones who built the pyramids, unquote, always seems to arise. However, I feel like saying that these incredible structures of human ingenuity being made by non-humans just because we cannot quite figure out how it was built is frankly disrespectful to the genius architects and mistreated slaves whose lives were poured into the construction of these incredible structures. So how did humans move the stones up the pyramids? Recently, I came to a realization. They didn't. The discovery that the stones were casted from molds instead of carved out of limestone quarries may very well be the last piece of the puzzle needed to determine just how the pyramids were assembled. It is quite notable that having slaves carry bags of concrete and parts for wooden casts up the ramps of the pyramids would have been much faster and easier to transport and would have required smaller, less sturdy ramps with less needed repairs. The proposition that the stones that made up the pyramids were built on the level that they were to stay indefinitely makes far more sense and would explain the efficiency with which the pyramids were built. From their resting spot on their desired level, they would only need to be pulled or pushed a couple of feet, or perhaps not even at all, minimizing the manpower put into dragging an entire 1-ton stone. However, my speculation remains simply an educated guess, based on the research of masters in the area of the pyramids in ancient Egypt, and the hard work of many scientists that have come before me. I hope to one day put more research into this speculation, as, after all, it was simply a theory of a student geologist fascinated with the mysteries of human ingenuity. For now, I suggest we give credit where credit is due, and respect the many architects, workers, technicians, and slaves who worked on the pyramids. After all, these were people whose lives were poured into the creation of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.